Welcome back, everybody, to Processing with MJ Upchurch, where we are exploring the world around us through the lens of faith. Today, we have a very fun topic and a very interesting guest that is very personal to me. But before we get into any of that, let's pray. Lord, thank you for today. Thank you for this opportunity we have to speak about you and to recognize the different ways that you're around us. I pray for the person on the other side of the screen that you fill all of the gaps in their lives, meet every single need, and bring them closer to you. Soften their heart and help them recognize you in everything that they do and everything around them as well. Speak through me and Thomas today and allow us to only say what would be uplifting for them and to build them in their faith and to bring your kingdom here. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, ladies and gentlemen, as I said, my guest today is very personal to me, very close to me. I consider him my actual brother. He was one of my groomsmen at my wedding. He is one of my teammates in college, one of my many teammates. I went to three schools, but anywho, he always pushes me to be better, especially when I don't feel like being better, no matter what. He is the annoying voice of positivity and the annoying voice of encouragement when I don't want it. But I can't thank him enough for truly everything that he is and has been in my life. My guy, Thomas McComb, is on the show. Thomas, welcome, brother. How
What's
you
going
doing?
on? I'm doing great, man. I'm out here in Lee's McRae College, Banner Elk. As you can see, I'm outside, so I'm just enjoying the weather out here. But really, MJ, I'm just honored to be
Mm-hmm.
here, man. This is an awesome opportunity, for both you and I and everybody watching. I think this is just like I'm just so honored to be a part of this. I know God's moving through this, and I'm just pumped. So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right, bro. I appreciate you for being here. So let's first, before we get into the topics that we may explore, let's first talk about you. Who are you? How do you know about God? How did you come to faith and all of those things? Just walk me through your life and how God has developed a relationship with
Right.
you.
Okay. So, um, as noted, I'm Thomas McComb. I am from Elkin, North Carolina, originally, and nobody knows where that's at. It's a super small town in the middle of kind of like farmland, middle of nowhere, in North Carolina. And I grew up in the church. I grew up knowing God. I grew up learning about Jesus and his teachings. And I always thought they were awesome. I always believed. I always um, understood, like, I don't want to say I always understood the weight of his sacrifice for us, because it's hard to do a lot of the time. And so I would say that from a young age, with growing up in a very God-centered family and church, it was really easy to know the gospel. But then whenever I was in school, I went to Elkin High School, Elkin Middle School, and Elkin Elementary School. Very small area, so everything's the same.
Mm,
But it was also cool. Let me touch on that. It was also really cool because I went to kindergarten with the same people that I graduated with, pretty much. So I was able to be with these people from like day one up to the top, and it was super encouraging to like see how people grew, and it was also kind of sad to see how some people didn't. But for me, going through school and being in the church, it was tough, and I know that rings true for many other believers that I know that are in my position, in our position now. That high school, middle school, elementary school is tough, especially with going to a public school and being a Christian. There's a lot of flack, I would say, uh, towards Christ. It was almost the way I grew up was, you have God, you have Jesus in church, and yes, you have God and Jesus outside of church, but you don't talk about it outside of church. It's very limited to Sundays, and it's just, I don't know, strange and weird to talk about Jesus outside of that. I'm not saying that it's not; it still is. That's part of the sin that's been introduced into our world. It's going to be strange, and it's going to be difficult to
mhm,
share Jesus. And so
mhm.
as a result of that, I kind of fell into a path of heavy. I want to say, that's kind of contradicting to say, but heavy lukewarmness. Like I was just
Mm.
very um, living for Jesus on Sundays, and then I'd go to school and I would just kind of forget everything I said. I'd go in with a foul mouth, telling wild jokes and just being a heathen pretty much. And that eventually led me into like mild party culture, I guess you could say. Um, but still, it's understanding over time throughout this entire section of my life where I was super lukewarm for Jesus. Um, he was still with me, and he was still in the back of my mind. I hate to say that he was in the back of my mind, but he was. There were many days where I would wake up and I'd pray, and then I'd just go and do stupid stuff with my friends, that was not like actions that were not praising him. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, I mean, I struggled with weed for a little bit of my life, um, probably half a year, I guess I'd say, and it was difficult. It was difficult coming from uh, a God-centered area, and then being introduced into like the real world where we have all of these temptations, and we have all of these real things that we can do for temporary happiness. And it was amazing to see that even through those dark times that I would consider the darkest times in my life, that God was still with me, and that I still felt Jesus. And eventually he like brought me back. He gave me chances, and I pretty much just said, you know what? No, I'm good. I got it myself. I'll take care of it. And then I didn't. Surprise. And he kind of roped me back in.
Hmm.
So I'm super thankful for that and that process. And what that process looks like. I know that's something we say. I know I say a lot is, oh, the process. All this like church talk, but it doesn't really. What does that mean? Uh, so
Hmm.
I was like, I've just been. I always knew that Jesus was with me, but I didn't feel convicted of the sin that I was in. Like I felt, oh yeah, no, it's all right, we're good. But then eventually, as I longed for um, more permanent happiness, and I longed for a greater purpose beyond just temporary happiness. I became convicted in the ways that were leading me to temporary happiness, and I just felt wrong for doing a lot of things that I did, and I got into the
Hmm.
Word and into prayer and saw that those things were not biblical. So, whoa, crazy. It's kind of exactly what you expect, but we were blinded by our own selfish desires. So that was a lot of talking. That's me. That's my relationship with God, and I'm just so happy that I'm
Hmm.
back on his track. So
Hmm. The cool thing about you and I and our relationship is we come from extremely different sides of the world
right,
or whatever.
right,
Obviously, I'm just from Maryland, you're from North Carolina, not far geographically, but our lifestyles and our communities that we grew up in were vastly different. I grew up in metropolitan areas, you grew up in rural
yes,
areas, and obviously race difference, whatever. But there, for both of us to have grown up in two very different walks of life, we both experienced extremely similar types of things as far as the way that we experience God in certain settings. So that tells me that it's not just one group of people, or it's not just one age demographic necessarily that has lived, I'm just gonna, God is my God on Sundays, or Jesus is my savior, but he's not my Lord. So
mm,
just to pick your
mm.
brain a little bit, we ain't talk about this at all in the pre-conversation. To pick your brain a little bit, why do you think that is that we grow up and just look at God on Sundays and then think that the next 6 days of the week we can pretty much go without him and go on our own strength? And I guess in addition to that, what did you see growing up, or what do you think was lacking growing up that could have driven you toward taking your faith more seriously at an earlier age?
That's an awesome question. I love that. So I don't think that. I mean, one thing that initially comes to my mind is I didn't see a lot of adults speaking the word out in public, unless it was like
Hmm.
um, on like a designated event. That's one thing that. Oh man, I read that in a book recently. That evangelism is not an event. That evangelism is a lifestyle. And living for Jesus is a
Yes.
lifestyle. It's not an event. It's not an event of going to church. It's a lifestyle of bringing Jesus with you throughout your life. And I think that's
Hmm.
something that I saw a lot of growing up. Is I saw that Jesus and God were treated as an event, but just not taken out into the world. I did see this sometimes, but just not very often. And that kind of, I guess that's, to me, as you said, we're from different places, different cultures, but we experience similar things. That's kind of
Hmm.
the American culture is comfort, and because it's difficult, it's super difficult to, for me at least, to share the gospel. Like it's just hard, because I put up all of these barriers in my brain. I put up all of these walls of, like, why I shouldn't do this, why I shouldn't say that, maybe why this isn't the right time, and most of that just comes back
Hmm.
to like selfishness, of just desiring to be comfortable in a
Hmm.
situation, and not stepping into like a moment of awkwardness for an eternal reward. And
Hmm.
I think it's just the culture that we're in. It's very centered around comfort, and it's comfortably in an event that we designate for God is like that. But whenever we designate our life for God, it's uh, it's so much bigger. So I just didn't see a whole lot of that
Absolutely.
growing up, to be honest.
For sure. Yeah, I can say the
Yeah.
same thing for sure. Went to church all the time, was there several days out of the week, but in like, I guess, home life, and even though I went to a Christian school, like other than like when they taught us in like Bible class or whatever, how much of it was overtly expressing
Mm,
Jesus and in the way that we acted and in the way that we spoke. So yeah, I think to sum it up in one word, it's discipleship.
right.
Like how
Yes.
deliberate were the people that were in authority positions able to guide us in the way that we should go, but not just guide us and hope that we end up that way, guide us very
Hmm.
intentionally. You said while you were talking that we are very comfortable and we fear discomfort essentially, and I was going to bring it up later, but ladies and gentlemen, this young man who's 20 years old had the opportunity recently to preach at his church. They felt that he is such a leader and so firm in his faith at this point that he was able to speak over a body of believers, the vast majority of them much older than him. So Thomas, talk to us about, first of all, what that was like speaking in on such a big platform, and how seriously you took the preparation, and obviously, of course, a little bit of what the message was in that sermon that you gave.
Right. So first of all, I appreciate that, because I mean, I feel like that's a lot of praise. I mean, to me, I was just preaching in church with to all these people that I grew up knowing. So it wasn't, like
Hmm.
I was honestly comfortable. So just to kind of dive into that,
Hmm.
what we just said. But no,
Yeah.
it's still difficult to prepare like a message, and to prepare teaching, and that goes from giving a sermon at a church all the way down to discipleship almost, and all the way down
Yeah.
to I don't want to say down to, because it's not like it's less, but
Yeah.
more focused, more centralized with a lesser amount of people, as like a Bible study
Hmm.
is. I think the same preparation is required and crucial, and that's as much as you can give. The more preparation you have, of
Thanks.
course, that's said with about everything in life. The more preparation you have, the more practice you have, the more training you can get into. You're gonna, see better results. And I spent maybe 2 weeks, I think, working on the sermon and this passage. The big thing for me was figuring out what I wanted to talk about. And for a second, I was like, or not a second, like a couple days, I was like, man, I just don't know what to talk about. What's going on? And then I was like, wait, I have God. Like, why am I not praying about this? And so that's
Mm.
another thing, is just involving God in daily decisions, and just little things that you may think is useless, like, man, what should I eat today? Like, pray about it. Why not? Prayer is the
Hmm.
first
Hmm.
line of defense, the first offense. So why don't we use it like that?
Hmm.
But this
Hmm.
sermon was super awesome and super encouraging to me, just from, like you said, a body of believers. It was so encouraging, to just be encouraged, and that's what it felt like to me. It was an opportunity for me to go up to my church and share some things that I had learned, mostly, and observed, uh, about our culture. And I already pretty much spoke on it, but comfort was kind of the topic of the sermon, and stepping out into uncomfortable
Hmm.
situations, and sharing the gospel, because I mean that stuff's eternal. That stuff is, if we believe it to be true, to be like, that's how the world's going to be, and that's how the afterlife
Hmm.
is. I mean, why don't we treat that with so much more respect? And so it's just
True.
it's just awesome to just think about it in that way. And I love the idea of, I mean, we're both athletes. We've both been through some pretty freaking brutal workouts, and so it's part of desiring the uncomfortable. And for me, this is part of what I talk about in my sermon. Is pain was something that I almost worshipped, and I almost worshipped the thought of me bettering myself uh, physically, and that was where I kind of sought my comfort, and it's where I found my ego was, in comfort and just my own ability. And that was something that I didn't even recognize that I had put my ego, put myself, put my comfort in. I didn't even recognize it. And so whenever I
Hmm.
started like getting back into the word and getting back into prayer, and starting to realize these things, um I'm still stubborn, I'm like, I can recognize what the problem is, but there's still a plank in my eye. And God pretty much had to pull the rug out from under me a little bit to kind of wake me up. And so I suffered
Hmm.
an ACL tear. um this is actually kind of funny. So I suffered the ACL tear, right? And I was like, oh, okay, whatever. It hurt for 5 minutes and I was good, and I was like walking around and I was pretty fine. And as stubborn
Hmm.
as I am, I went out and just kept on, like, doing stuff, and I kept on like running and jumping as soon as the swelling went down. That's how stubborn I am, dude. And so I ended up tearing my meniscus playing basketball like 2 weeks later. And like, it's just amazing to think about that, and how much, like, just pride I had in myself, and like I wouldn't even see the problem. I couldn't even see the problem of with that, and just the
Hmm.
comfort that I had in myself. And so coming back from surgery, as I still am in recovery, it's a very different kind of pain, and I just praise the Lord because He's humbled me for it, and He's humbled me through it,
Yeah.
and I've been able to see Him and how He's working in my life so much more since then.
Hmm.
So my own idolatry, man, that was in the way.
Hmm. Yeah, you said exactly what I was about to say, that you kind of made an idol out of your basically physical body, being able to carry yourself through things. So you made that an idol. And I obviously, I think all of us make an idol out of something. What I said it in episode one, whatever you hold most valuable is what you
Hmm.
worship, is
Yeah.
therefore then your idol. If it's outside of God, it's your idol. If you hold this to be the most important thing in your life, then yeah, it's what you worship. It's what your idol is. So mentioning that, it kind of takes us right into I guess the bulk of the topic that we're about to get into. And I think this story is a massive allegory for idolatry and how we can depend on ourselves when we should be depending on
Mm.
God. So Thomas and I
Mm.
have a common interest in a book series that came out long ago that was then made into movies early, well, I guess before you were born,
Yes.
but the year I was born.
It was close. It was close.
So
It was
young.
close.
Yeah, yeah. So we are going today to be talking about Lord of the Rings and how J.R.R. Tolkien put faith into those stories. So first, to give a little bit of background about Tolkien and Lord of the Rings, Tolkien wrote many books, a lot of them science fiction, and so before Lord of the Rings is part of a like kind of larger book series, and they began with a book called the Silmarillion, which really sets up all of the setting and all of the characters and stuff like that for Lord of the Rings. So in the Silmarillion, the only thing I'm going to say about it is at the very beginning of it, there is a creation story similar to that of the Bible. There is a creation song where God is singing and creating the universe and all known matter and everything is existing in harmony. And this is all cool until this evil presence decides to try to interfere with the song and sing into it and just create chaos essentially. So that's how we end up where we are in Lord of the Rings. There are people that exist in different spaces. There are the hobbits that live in the Shire, the elves that live in the woods, and the man who lives in their kingdoms and stuff like that. So everyone is able to live in harmony, kind of in their own spaces and whatnot. And Sauron, who is the big evil in the story, he is pursuing power and pursuing his own rule and authority over the entire world. So by doing that, he's causing dysfunction and chaos and disrupting harmony. So that's a little bit of background about Tolkien, well, it's not about Tolkien, but about his line of books. So Tolkien was Catholic in his belief and in his philosophies, and he actually said that when he was first writing it, Lord of the Rings, he said it was, of course, a fundamentally religious and Catholic work, unconsciously at first, but consciously in the revision. So what he had believed was coming out in his art, and upon revisiting it and tweaking some things, he realized, oh, this is kind of pretty much overtly an allegory about and needs God to accomplish anything, essentially. So I'm not going to dominate the conversation. Thomas, you know a lot more about Lord of the Rings than I do. So how did you even first encounter Lord of the Rings, and what has God done through Lord of the Rings in your life?
Hmm. I like that last part. That's interesting. So Lord of the Rings is, I wouldn't say, I don't know. I think that at this point, I think the way you've picked it up, we're probably around the same track of our understanding of it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's cool to see.
Mm-hmm.
But Lord of the Rings was always kind of like a Star Wars, I guess. To me, like growing up, I mean, I always kind of knew what Star Wars was, and I could rattle off the plot like in probably 2 minutes. Lord of the Rings takes me a
Mm-hmm.
little bit longer, you know. I mean, it's such a cool story. It's such an awesome like adventure
Yeah.
and that kind of thing. But I
Yeah.
didn't grow up watching them because they're such long movies, and my attention span was that of a fly, and
Mm-hmm.
it was just
Bro, I made a mistake when I first watched them. I watched the director's cut of each one. So each one is like
yeah, like 4.
4 hours. I don't know why I did that, but I don't think I have like the right experience as everybody else because I have way more information than most people have with
Yeah, it's
seeing
just
it.
impressive that
But
you got through
eventually I'll
that.
rewatch them.
That is impressive.
Yeah, it took like all day for each movie because I was still at school, so I would go to lunch and just watch it at lunch and stuff. But yeah, sorry, go
No,
ahead.
you're right. So I mean, it was just something that I knew about, something that I hadn't like fully like watched or really kind of dove into. And I
Mhm.
mean, eventually I just kind of started watching him and I started noticing things. I guess the first time I watched it, I was like, wow, that was a freaking sick story. I'd love to watch that again. That was cool. I feel empowered and ready to run through the woods right now. And I mean, it was
Mhm.
just, I don't know, it was super fun. It was something different. And I just loved watching him growing up. And I don't know, I guess it was in high school. I guess I started like watching them and started paying attention to kind of the themes that were in the series, and started to kind of pick up on
Mhm.
the nuances of the story. And it's just it's super cool. If I don't want to like drop a whole lot of spoilers, but I mean it has been out for a while, so you know
Yeah,
it.
you're good, bro. Let it eat. It's been out for 23
Right. So,
years now, the
so
first one at least.
y'all just go
So,
and watch them if you haven't. Um, Even if you
yeah.
know the ending, it's so good. But
Mhm.
it's as far as the way like the last part of that question you said, how have I seen like God move as it pertains to that story? I mean, it's inspired
Mhm.
me. That's a story that has inspired me for a pretty long time. As far as enduring pain for greater good. Um, that's like a theme that I take from it a lot.
Yeah.
As Frodo,
Yeah.
you know, suffers and goes through this process of pretty much like, I mean, holding holding sin almost. I mean, he goes through this
Mhm.
process of doing that, and it's incredible what he gets through. But it's important to remember it's so awesome what he gets through with his brothers, and specifically with Sam. But what I see in that story is I see love. I see love from all of the characters, well, all of the positive characters. How they work with each other, and there's not like a main character in the story. Um,
Not at
so
all.
it's amazing to watch and see how all of these different characters all have a specific style, a specific like portion, and a slice of the pie of love, and they all just kind of fit together and you know eventually kind of win. So they kind of it's like a loss, it's
Yeah.
like a win lose situation, but you know.
Mhm. Yeah, I think two massive ways to view Lord of the Rings is exactly what you just said in love. There is two competing ideas and philosophies that basically love for others versus love for self. So we have from the good guys or whatever, all of the people who are in the Fellowship of the Ring: Gimli, Aragorn, Frodo, Sam, um, Legolas, Gandalf. All of those people are doing people from extremely different walks of life. We
Mm,
have elves, we have man, we have a wizard, we have a hobbit. All of those people join together to defeat this evil that affects all of them. And like you said, there's not really a main character. Obviously, as far as film goes, there's always one guy who has more lines than everybody else, which is Frodo.
yeah.
But throughout, in light of the fact that those books are in connection to the Silmarillion and that this is all a story that begins with God, Tolkien
Mm,
also said that Lord of the Rings is about God and his sole right to divine honor. So we see that struggle for people to find honor with it within themselves and with the things that they hold dear. Going back to that point that you said about idolatry. So I think that's really what determines the characters and the way that they end in the story. The people who cared most about love for themselves or love for others. Because even in Saruman, right,
mm.
he was evil, he was a bad guy or whatever. But in the books, it doesn't really show much in the movies, but in the books, what he wanted was good for the whole world or whatever. He wanted everyone to be able to function at maximum capacity. But he wanted that because he wanted essentially everyone to work well as long as he was on top. And then that caused him to be taken over by his own evil and his own pride. So, what else have you seen, or what other characters have represented, I guess, love or the lack there, or the love for themselves or the love for pride and power? And what are some of the other themes that jumped out at you in Lord of the Rings?
I love um, the Gandalf, Saruman, uh,
Yes,
you know,
that comparison is
juxtaposition
great.
is so cool, so
Yes,
cool.
yes,
Because Saruman is of he's Saruman the White, and like this
hmm
in this world, wizards that are white hold like a higher ranking. They have like super long white hair, and they kind of look just older, I guess. I don't. It's kind of how I see it.
hmm
And so they're inherently supposed to be wiser and supposed to they just carry more responsibility in the world. And Gandalf the Grey is on a different level, a different playing field than Saruman the White, and yet
hmm
I think it's crucial to understand that just because Saruman has greater power, it doesn't mean that he's using that power for good. And yes, I think that his it's so cool. I think that his desire for, like you said, his desire for efficiency is
hmm
interesting, and I think that desire is good. And I mean, even today, I mean, I desire to have an efficient schedule, and I desire to have an efficient way about my life. Um,
for
but
sure.
you don't want to worship the schedule, and in that way, he gives his power, he gives his identity to Sauron, the Dark Lord, and uses and Sauron in that way because he desires efficiency. He uses that against Saruman and almost like corrupts him into
Yeah.
wanting to be a pawn in Sauron's world conquering um,
hmm
method and plan. And so eventually,
hmm
we see like this machine that Saruman's created, where he's got the orcs and the Orokai.
Yep.
The Orokai are supposed to be like
Yep.
a new, better, awesome, upgraded warrior, and they look disgusting, by the way. So yeah, they're
Gross. Giant
yeah, pretty
boogers.
much just
Giant
popping out
boogers.
the ground. And
Yeah.
yeah, so his desire for this efficiency eventually led to this super machine oriented. I mean, there's like in the movies, there's a ton of shots of just like this massive thing that he's created, and it's like this industrial complex of these orcs and the wood they're chopping down. It's right in the middle of a forest, and they're just plopping these trees out of the ground and making stuff, and that's also really
Yeah.
cool. The what's his name, Treebeard. Whenever Treebeard's hanging out with
Yep.
Merry and Pippin, and they're like, they're going to save the trees, they're going to save their realm, and it's a sacrifice of, oh my gosh, all my brothers are dying because this guy is just bent on this efficiency to the point of destruction, and they go in to stop him. That's awesome. I'm diverging away from where I was talking about. So Gandalf
Good.
is talking. more so like the way he moves throughout the Hobbit, the Lord of the Rings, and some of
Mhm.
the other things that Tolkien's put out with Gandalf in. He always moves, maybe not always, but most of the time he moves in a way that you can understand. Wow, he actually has a deep care for these people that he's working with, and
Mhm.
he's working towards. I would say Gandalf is less about efficiency because I just think he's not super efficient character. Like he just kind of he'll put somebody in an awesome situation and then just kind of dip for like half a movie and then come back and like tie it back together.
Facts.
But his mission is of peace. I is what I would lean towards, his mission being of peace, and
Mhm.
even then, I mean, he approaches peace uh, with fighting, which is kind of funny. But I don't know. It's super cool to see just the juxtaposition between those two, especially whenever they fight.
Yeah.
And oh my gosh, whenever Gandalf the White appears is something crazy.
Yeah. Oh my, I was literally just about to get into that, so I'm glad you did say that. To quickly go back to what you just
Yeah.
said about the juxtaposition of the two, I think they're a perfect description of exactly what I was asking about love for others versus love for self.
Mm.
Gandalf, at the very beginning, when we first meet him, essentially, and he first sees the ring, you can see in his eyes that he's drawn to the ring pretty much as anybody else is, but he knows better than to touch it because if he were to get that, oh no, nobody was gonna be able to stop
He
him
knows
for
his
real.
own power. He
Literally
knows his own
nobody.
power.
Get exactly. Gandalf was like that for real. And whereas Saruman thought that he could handle it, so he did take that on. So still staying on the topic of Gandalf, and for anybody who thinks that we're reaching or this might be a stretch and it's not actually Christian or Catholic or whatever religious literature around centered around God. First of all, Tolkien said it himself, it is. But second of all, in with the machine that you were referring to, they literally defeat the machine with the flood.
Yes. Yes.
So and then for the second one, I'm not going to spoil it. I'm going to let you talk about it. But Gandalf, I have found, just like in most literature and most TV shows, there is a Jesus figure. And not to ever say that any of those characters can take away sins or anything like that, but that 9 times out of 10, it just means that they are usually the voice of reason. But even more than that, they are the
Mm.
sacrifice element of within the
Hmm.
movie. So obviously, Gandalf speaks to them and guides Frodo and all of his Hobbit homies on their journey. And he's speaking to them and guiding them in the way that they should go and all of that. But then they're escaping that underground place in the mountain where
Balrog.
the troll, not the trolls. Yeah, yeah, exactly. So he then hooks with Balrog, and yeah, pick it up from there. Tell us how that is, and how basically does Gandalf reflect Jesus in the story.
So before I say that, I wanna. You said this that Jesus presents himself like in the story almost, and Jesus
Hmm.
is in this story. It's clear and obvious. But where
Hmm.
he is where you kind of gotta like take a step back and be like, yeah. So
Hmm.
Jesus, from what I've read from people that have studied Tolkien's works, Jesus has kind of presented himself, or Tolkien has presented Jesus, rather, in a way where, as you said, not one character embodies Christ, but really it's
Yeah.
the collective fellowship of the ring that all
Yep.
embody Christ through their own sacrifice, their own, and that's what pretty much all they all do. They all sacrifice something
Yeah.
that they have and that they love for
Hmm.
somebody else. Like Sam, Sam sacrifices the comfort that he has back home and the comfort that he has in the Shire,
The
and
Shire.
Frodo the
Yep.
same. But they get up and go on a quest, and I mean, they that's an awesome part. Like, oh my gosh, this is the farthest I've ever gone away from the Shire, and they keep going and they go and do some amazing things just because they sacrificed just that one little awkward moment and that one place where they gave it up and surrendered and said, you know what, let's do this thing because this is for a greater good.
Yeah.
Um, so back to Gandalf the Grey and how he kind of has a his Jesus role, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Um, whenever they're in, oh my gosh, I can't remember the name of the caverns.
Me neither. But I just know it was the place underground with the giant
Right,
pillars.
it's in the mist. Is it in the
Yeah.
Misty Mountains? I don't remember. Doesn't matter. But they're down in the cavern. They're running from this demon essentially. And it's a demon. It's not like Sauron, but it's a
It's like pure evil,
Yes,
honestly. It's literally
yes.
just a giant
It's
beast
just
of
a
hatred and
huge
fire.
bull with a tail of a whip,
Yeah.
horns,
Yep.
shoots fire. I mean, it looks like something out of hell. And they're down
Nightmare
there,
fuel.
yes, nightmare fuel. And so they're down there, going at this thing, but they're not fighting it, they're running from it. Because they're trying to escape and
Hmm.
keep, because they have this ring that's precious, and if they die with the ring will inherently be found by somebody else eventually, 2,000, 4,000, 80,000 years later, and then who knows what will happen. Um,
Hmm.
so they know that they got precious cargo, and so that's kind of the whole story really, is they know they have precious cargo, and they're sacrificing themselves for the betterment of the world, but also the
Hmm.
group, which is kind of the specified symbolic piece of the world is within the group of them. And so this is such an awesome scene. Uh, so Balrog is chasing them down. They're going across this bridge, but if
Hmm.
something doesn't happen, this is the turning point of that of this movie, I think, and of the story,
Yeah.
where Gandalf has been the leader. He has been the guiding hand that encourages, whenever the whenever the hobbits are like scared, they're like, "Yo, where's Gandalf at? I need
Hmm.
my man here so he can do his wizardry." Um, and
Yeah.
and so he's like the cornerstone of the fellowship in a way. He's the one that recognizes that there needs to be a fellowship in the first place, and he's the leader.
Hmm.
And so the way that Jesus led, and the way that Jesus leads still and will lead in the future, is leadership out of service. He serves as a leader, and recognizes that and does that perfectly. And Gandalf represents that in the story. He
Hmm.
symbolizes the sacrifice that he puts of himself ultimately, on the line in this moment to save the fellowship and save the mission, of the fellowship. And so he goes down in this pit with Balrog, um, and man, that's just such an invigorating and such a powerful, like, "You shall not pass" moment. I love that.
Yeah,
But
bro.
it's
It's
so
one of the best lines and best executions of a line in cinema.
yes, yes, ultimately.
It just is.
But it's
Yeah.
so cool whenever the transition from that to the next, whenever the next time you see Gandalf, is so cool. I don't want to. I'll,
Yes.
I'll let you jump on that actually. Yeah. No, that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't care. I'm about to spoil it. So before,
Oh,
it's not
do it.
really that much of a spoiler because he tells them before anyway. He
Yeah.
says he tells Aragorn, I don't remember how many days, but he's like on, I don't want to say the third day, and sorry, because I'm not reaching, but he's like, on this day when the sun rises from the east, you will like have help basically or whatever. So Gandalf dies, he's gone, everybody's freaked out. He's been talking to them and guiding them this whole time. He knows more about the ring and how to destroy it. Literally nobody else knows anything about the ring except him. He's
Yes.
guiding them through their whole journey. And all of a sudden he's dead and gone. So everybody is like, hold on. Now, hold on. I thought we were going to have a wizard on our side, so I wasn't as scared. I was as worried, but it's just us now against literal evil. So that's clearly to me the disciples' reaction to after Jesus
Mm,
dies. So
yes.
not only that,
Hopeless.
but Gandalf having told them that
He gonna be
there
there.
would be help coming from the east. He then comes back as Gandalf of the White in this larger than life pure state, like with all the help that they needed to defeat the orc army when all hope looked lost for Aragorn and the rest of man when they were being attacked. He pulls up from the east and he comes literally in a flash of light to defeat and bring help against all of the orcs. But like we said, Gandalf isn't necessarily the main character. There isn't necessarily one main character in this story. So even though he is like almost identical to the fact that he died, came back to life, and brought power, and then spoke to them and guided them through this process, the same way Jesus did with the disciples, how he died and then came back to life and with all power in his hand or whatever. Gandalf, however, did not come back with all power in his hand. He brought the giant eagles or whatever. They were doing damage, but they didn't defeat the whole army. The evil wasn't defeated until the group was able to accomplish the full goal. So Gandalf, while I said he's a Jesus figure, he's not Jesus by any
He's a
means.
Jesus puzzle piece.
Exactly. That's a bar, a Jesus puzzle
It
piece. That's
but
tough.
it speaks.
You
Sorry, I want to interrupt you right now. I really want to, because
mhm,
because it
for sure.
because it shows like how crazy, how awesome, how incredible of a character, and personality that Jesus is. That he cannot even be
Mhm.
contained in this.
Yeah,
This is fantasy.
yeah,
Like this is a fantasy story,
that's
Lord of the
facts.
Rings, and even
Yeah,
still, the character of Jesus is impossible to be portrayed in one person. I mean,
that's
that's
facts.
God, dude. That's God.
Yeah,
Like the only way that we can see Jesus, fully man, fully God, is in the Bible, and I think that's good, and I think it's a great choice from Tolkien to speak like low key, but also kind of high key, low key about the Bible and who Christ is, while also including Christ's doctrine and the way he moves and leads.
yeah, absolutely. So a while back, another character who's probably he's my favorite character in the
I'm
series.
interested.
Um, the person that before doing my research I would have argued as the main character, but not necessarily. But my favorite character by far, Samwise Gamgee, right?
Interesting.
My guy is the reason that the ring was destroyed. Period. Point
Yes.
blank. Not to. I'm spoiling.
No,
It's been
do
out for
it. Come
20
on.
years. Frodo gets to the volcano where they have to get to. Gandalf is like, you got to go all the way up there, destroy the ring,
It's a
and then
crazy
we
looking
good.
mountain too.
Everything's
Like this
fine.
this is a serious task. If we put this through human
Oh
eyes,
my
this is a
goodness.
serious task.
Exactly. So because this is such a daunting task, they've traveled forever, super far, gone through so much. Frodo has literally been stabbed by a demon witch person,
Yes.
so he's
Yes,
like
he's
not recovering. It's literally just getting worse.
mhm.
So, and on top of that, he has the ring on him, which is constantly
Is
making
I
him more and
consider it
more
like a
worse.
a spiritual, almost mental affliction that he's going through with the ring
Yes,
on him. I mean, it's he's
absolutely.
battling within
Yeah.
between
Wow.
darkness and light.
Yes. Yeah. While his body is like malfunctioning and he can't move, it's definitely within inside of him as
Mm.
well. And we see that when we get up to the volcano. Sam literally puts him on his back and carries him up a volcano to destroy the ring. And see, he's like, Frodo, we made it, bro. We good. We can go back to the
Right.
Shire. Just throw the ring in the lava. And Frodo says, no. What you mean no?
After all these
We just
hours,
all this like, bro, we've walked forever. Let's go home. And Frodo is finally he succumbs to the temptation of the ring and cannot resist it anymore. And he's like, I'm keeping this ring. It's all power. I deserve it. I'm keeping it. They end up hooking. And the whole time, Sam is like, Frodo, bro, like, I don't want to do this.
yeah,
I don't want to beat you up right now,
exactly.
but I'm going to do what I got to do. And
Greater good, man.
the reason Sam is my favorite character is because he is so focused, not just getting back to where he was before, but wanting to experience the rest of life in front of him with his people in harmony, the way that they were designed to
Yes.
be. He's not just stuck in the past or whatever. He's wanting to get back there to continue to build the life that he had established and started for him. So Sam is by far my favorite character. Who would you say yours is,
Man, I
and why?
I gotta go with Aragorn, dude. He's just freaking cool.
That's
Like
valid.
he's just a cool dude.
Yeah, that's
He's
facts.
he's strong. He's and he leads super well. But he's
Yes.
also like I don't know. He's kind of mysterious and it's just sick. And
Yeah.
the way he the way he like leads and serves is inspiring to me. Because
Hmm.
he can lead, yet he's on the front lines. And that's
Hmm.
something that I know just from. I mean, obviously, this isn't like a historical narrative. This is a fantasy. Let's remember. But that's something that we don't see throughout world history in wars and in that way. Because I mean, ultimately, in the Lord of the Rings, these are wars, and
Hmm.
it's incredible to see the leader at the front of the line and not at the back of the line commanding, but leading.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
just so inspiring to me because I mean, we obviously, I mean, I'm not in a war right now. I'm outside, enjoying the sun. but that's
Mhm.
inspiring in the way of leadership and how it should be done. We can just learn from that. And I
Mhm.
think he put his body on the line because he's a human. He's not like something mythical. I think that's
Yeah.
another reason why I really like him. Is because I can almost like, oh yeah, I can do those things. It's a fantasy, Tom. Be quiet. But you know, it's like I can almost reason with it, and I can be like, yo, this guy's going through the same thing as me, and so I can relate myself in the same way. I mean, I can relate myself to Jesus because he's a human and he went through the exact same things that I've gone through, that you've gone through, and that you on the other side of the screen that's
Yeah.
listening right now has gone through. I mean, that's what's so awesome. You just every single character like in this story that's a protagonist, you just like you have to go towards Jesus with it, and that's what's so cool
Yes.
about this what would you call this realm? I don't know. Like this fantasy story. It's
Yeah.
so cool the way that Tolkien's created it. But yeah, Aragorn's my favorite
For sure.
because I want to go hunt some deer with Aragorn. I think that'd be hilarious and super fun, and I would feel
Yeah.
just
For sure.
manly as heck. I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. Like Aragorn, I would probably say is my second favorite. He was somebody I didn't care about that much. I guess just because he's a regular guy, like the only regular guy in the
Mm-hmm.
group, so he didn't jump out to me. But as I've spent more time with the content, I've been like, the fact that he is a
And
regular
he's doing,
guy
yeah,
makes him kind of
and he's like
crazy.
hanging with the elves.
So, and at the end, exactly. Like elves are immortal, by the way.
Yes.
So Legolas is just flexing on everybody. He's like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Like
I
you
can
can't
do
die.
everything.
Yeah.
I'm him.
It's
But
it's not
exactly.
it's not as much of a
So and
sacrifice.
Aragorn is just at all. Exactly.
But hey,
So
what does Legolas sacrifice?
I don't know. Him and Gimli was just beefing the whole time.
Dude, I love their relationship and their comedic relief.
Bro,
It's
yeah,
so
they're
good.
literally just counting bodies every time they're in a
Yeah.
battle. They're like, huh, I've
7.
killed
Yeah.
9. And he's like, no, I've killed 10. Yeah.
No, but
Yeah.
I think that he sacrifices I think he sacrifices his time and his people because you
That's
know he
true.
is
That's
immortal
true.
and he could, so like why does this matter to him?
That's true.
But he sympathizes with the people of the world, and he sympathizes
That's true.
even. I mean, this is empathy. I think he's there doing it, feeling it with them. Um,
Hmm.
these battles and things that ultimately don't affect him, but he knows will affect the world around him. And I think
That's
that's
facts.
important for us to remember as we just go through life because there's so many things that like I could say, oh, I don't need to do that. It doesn't affect me. But I mean, come on, dude. I
Hmm.
live in this world. Everything
Yeah.
affects me and where I am in life. So that's it's a cool thing that he didn't spend his time just hanging out with his homies, shooting arrows at the archery range or whatever you call it. Um,
Right.
but he was actually out there serving for the world. So
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right because the way that the elves are portrayed in both Lord of the Rings and the Hobbits, they're extremely
hmm
selfish and self-centered and don't really care about what's going
yes,
on with anything else. That's the whole plot of the
yeah,
Hobbit at the very
exactly.
beginning, literally the very first scene, and they're telling us about how we are where we are now. That when the dragon comes and attacks, what are Gimli's people's name? What
The
are they?
dadgummit, dude. The
Yeah, I'm blanking.
the
They're not
dwarves,
hobbits,
the
but they're like
dwarves.
the dwarves. Thank
Yes,
you, the dwarves, my guy.
the mines of
So yeah,
Moria.
the
That's where they are.
dwarves.
Whenever
Yes, that's right.
Balrog and Gandalf
Yeah, when
have
the
that
Balrog
exchange.
situation
That's
happens.
Mines of Moria. That's the
Yeah,
Dwarf Kingdom.
for sure. So in the Hobbit, the dwarves, the dragon, Smog,
Yes.
he comes up and he is about to lay waste to them, and the dwarves are like, "Yo, elves, y'all been our homies, like." Help
hmm
us, and the elves literally turn their back on
Yeah.
them because they're like, "This ain't got nothing to do with
hmm
us." Like, so yeah, it is massive for Legolas to step out of his comfort for the greater good, like you said. And another person, I guess we're just going through the whole
Let's do it,
Fellowship of
dude.
the Ring. Gimli, Gimli is strictly for honor. Like the dwarves care a lot about honor
Family is
more than many
yeah.
other
The
species.
dwarves
Like
and Vin
he's
Diesel.
doing it strictly for his people. Exactly. Like by this
They're all
time,
family,
there
man.
aren't very many dwarves. It's literally like just Gimli left.
Yeah.
So he's doing it to carry his family lineage and represent well what the values of his people are. So it's amazing that they have two incredibly, I think that's why they beef essentially. They
Yeah.
have two very competing types of personalities and philosophies and ideologies. Legolas, his people are more selfish. They're not, it's not even like they're selfish among themselves. They literally individually
Blatantly.
only kind of care about
Yeah.
themselves. Exactly. And the dwarves, they're all like, nah, we all need each other to form our society and whatnot. So when they get against each other, like it's funny in the movie and everything, a little bit of comedic relief, but man, it is actually a big depiction of how within our own body of Christ, we have people with different philosophies and
Mm.
different ideas. But if we're pursuing the right thing, if we're following Jesus and that is our focus, we can put aside our differences and ultimately we'll both let go a little
It's
bit
nothing more
of
than just
what it
comedic,
is that we thought was so
you
important.
know?
Exactly. So it is it's a joke that we hold so seriously the things that we do
Absolutely.
above just following
Mm.
Jesus. So all right, we got one more character to talk
Okay.
about, not in the fellowship, but one of the most important characters in the story, especially in my opinion, representing man and us today.
Mm. Where are you going?
Everybody's favorite ugly little
Yep.
dude, Gollum.
Gollum. Oh my goodness.
Or Smeagol back when
Smeagol.
he was a human. So to give a little bit of context, so The Hobbit is another trilogy that came out. It's a prequel to the Lord of the Rings movies, and they're their own books, but all connected. It literally happens right before Lord of the Rings. So Smeagol was a regular person, regular human being. Him and his boy were, I think, out on a lake,
Yeah, they
like
were in a pond
fishing.
just hanging out.
And yeah, exactly. And something glimmers under the water that catches Smeagol's friend's eye, and he finds the ring. He picks it up, and he's like, "Whoa, this is cool looking. What is this?" And Smeagol immediately is so drawn to the ring that he decides he has to have it for himself, and he beats his friend to death over the ring. And the first words, I don't know if it's the first words, but he then says his famous line for the first time,
Yeah.
"My precious."
Yeah.
Because from that moment moving forward, Smeagol values the ring above literally
Even
everything
himself.
else. So literally, and because he has the ring for so long, no one person is meant to hold this ring because it will literally destroy you. It'll take you away from who you were, and it gives him excessively long life as well. Like he lives way longer than a
Hmm.
regular human being is supposed to live, but it's not living. He's not just immortal and able to be who he was. His body deteriorates. He walks on all fours. He goes bald. He turns gray. He loses teeth. He wears a loincloth. Literally looks
Yeah.
disgusting. Lives in a
Yeah.
cave.
Repulsive.
Can't talk. And on top of that, his personality splits into two people. There's still Smeagol inside of him, which was his good man nature, but now there's also Gollum, who wants nothing but to care for the ring and to keep the ring for himself. And they do an incredibly good job, even better in Lord of the Rings than in The Hobbit, of exploring how Smeagol is still in there, how he's battling with Gollum. So, what did the Smeagol Gollum narrative do for you as far as not just pushing the story along, but maybe revealing something about yourself or about other people?
Yeah, Smeagol is a huge just allegory, just symbolic reference to humans. Um, we have
Yeah,
we have this like I mean we this has been old as time, you know, devil on one shoulder, angel on the other. And
right.
Smeagol like clearly has that. He's got a literal divided personality. He's got like, you know,
Hmm.
his Hobbit past and he's got his whatever you'd call what he turns into. And
Yeah,
so
just
yeah,
Gollum.
Gollum. And
Hmm.
that's ultimately, I mean, if not for this let me just back up. So the hobbits are a very peaceful, very comfortable,
Hmm.
very happy, joyous kind of people. And they just like, you know, just farm. They're very, like just they just kind of farm and they live where they live and they enjoy it and they hang out with each other. And it's like the almost kind of utopian society. And
It's true.
so whenever Smeagol not Smeagol, yes, whenever Smeagol is introduced to the ring, I mean that temptation immediately just like I take it back to Adam and Eve is what I see. I mean, as soon as the temptation's there, he's knocked out. He's out of he wasn't
Yeah.
able to live among the Shire and the hobbits. Now later on, Bilbo Baggins is able to like kind of hide and with the ring and that kind of thing. But with
Hmm.
Smeagol, he's fully consumed by it, um, and he's taken out of the Shire by the ring and by the ring's desires, powers that he just succumbs to and just follows. Um, but I see it in myself as I can't pay my own sin, like how we see in the Old Testament. So many times they have walked away from God, and so many times they have to pay sacrifice, like through atonement of sin, and through these other sacrifices, food offerings, drink offerings, all of these things. There's
Yeah.
no way for me, in myself, to pay off my sin, almost like resist the temptations of the flesh in the way that Smeagol has, only through the power of Jesus are we able to defeat that. And ultimately, at the
Yeah.
end, I mean, we see you mentioned it earlier with Frodo and Smeagol; they're both there, and they're. I mean, really, it's the desire of the ring, the desire of power, and what power does to people. Um, and as humans, this is the power that we just give to ourselves. You know, this isn't like we don't put on a ring and go freaking nuts. No, we are like we
Hmm.
since the fall have this in us, and we are separated from God eternally. Um,
Hmm.
and through Jesus, we are able to be with Him, and through Him we have everlasting life in that way. And so with Smeagol, like I want you to talk about like how he how he ended up like what's the grand narrative of Smeagol in the end, like what what's kind of
Yeah.
the result.
Yeah, I purposely left it out when I talked about Frodo and Samwise or Sam. I don't. I hate that his name is Samwise. That's just a weird name to me. Anywho, Sam when they're in the volcano. Yeah, I purposely left him out. But in that scene when I said Frodo gave into the ring and him and Sam were fighting over trying to destroy it, there's a third person there. Gollum is there. Gollum guided them up to the volcano. First of all, we should ask the question: how did Gollum know to get up there? We find out through Gollum's internal monologue that he is being tempted by Sauron. So Sauron is the reason that he has the
Yeah.
information to how to destroy the ring. Sauron wants the ring back. So they're in a very, very dangerous situation, not just because it's a volcano, but because if they bring it up there, then they're at the very closest point they can get to Sauron, so Sauron can get
And
the
that's
ring
where the
back.
temptation is the
But
strongest, you know.
absolutely, when we're at the closest to being able to destroy and defeat the sin within us, it becomes the hardest right then. It's always darkest before the dawn,
Mm.
you know. So with Gollum, Gollum is the whole time he's guiding them, he has his own secret agenda. So he basically has two secret
Yeah.
agendas. He's
Yeah.
serving Sauron out of fear, but he wants the ring for himself. More than anything else, he wants the ring for himself. So Sam and Frodo are fighting, and Gollum jumps in and bites off Frodo's finger to get the ring back. So we have no idea whether or not Frodo would have actually kept the ring or if Sam would have gotten it off of him, but it wasn't going anywhere. They were actually just fighting, and Gollum takes the ring. But in taking the ring, he then falls into the volcano with the ring, and
But
he's burnt
he
up by
falls
lava.
like the way he falls is so
Yes,
corrupt,
the whole
so
time he's
corrupt.
reaching up. He has the ring in his hand, and he's not worried about the fact that his body is literally burning away. He's just staring at the ring until he sinks
He is
into the
so
lava.
distracted.
And the last thing we see is his eyes fixed on the ring, and while he dies, and then the ring is destroyed. So like you said, what does Gollum have anything to do with us? What is this like? What who cares? That's just a dumb creature that let
Mm.
himself get too caught up in the lust for power or whatever. I would argue that most of us do the same thing, whether consciously or
Mm.
unconsciously. As athletes, like you and
Yeah.
I said, all of us want to play. We all want to be the guy on our teams, especially both of us. We haven't said it yet, but both of us were goalkeepers on the same team.
Yes.
One
Yes.
goalkeeper is on the field at the same time. So Thomas and I'm a senior. Thomas is a freshman when he comes to Leeds McRae. And we're both competing for the number one spot. We both want to be the guy in the net that our team depends on to keep us out to win the game for us. Essentially, goalkeepers win games; they just simply do. Um, long story short, neither of us got the spot, but anywho, um, we every single one of us, we want to be the guy, we want to be the girl in every single space that we're in. We want the attention, we want the power, we want the
Mm,
authority. And for those of you saying not, I believe you, but at the same time, we all desire some kind of control. Life just doesn't feel good when we're not in
yeah,
control
yeah.
necessarily. And that's perfectly natural. It makes complete sense. Nobody wants to feel out of control. But we only can actually find soul sustaining control by giving whatever it is that we want to Jesus and following in his way. Because if we do what we want to do, if we achieve the control that we want to achieve, we will become like
Mm-hmm.
Gollum, where our
Mm-hmm.
entire life is devoted to whatever it is that we're pursuing. I experienced it, and I think we talked about it before back when we were at Leeds McCrae. Athletes a lot of times wrap up our identity in our
Yeah,
sport,
yeah.
and it's not just athletes. People wrap up their themselves in their careers too, like in corporate America, in many different spaces. Authors wrap themselves up in their books and stuff. So if we keep our eyes so focused on what we do, what we have in front of us, we will ultimately betray God and betray ourselves. We're not meant to hold the weight of glory. We're not. We can't have control. We can't have it the way that we want to because ultimately it will overtake us. The enemy doesn't play fair. He knows what we desire based on our actions, based on our words. So he's going to put it in front of us as much as possible and make it appear really good. The ring, it looks like a regular ring. It's just a gold band. It looks kind of harmless, but the more you give into the temptation of I need this thing or else I'm exposed, then you're saying that yourself, you are able to sustain yourself
Mm-hmm.
and you are the ultimate source of control and
Yeah.
safety in your life. So I think that's what Gollum essentially represents. He falls to the ring and it completely destroys his body, completely destroys his mind. And I remember when I first watched it, I was like, yeah, freak that dude. Like, he been plotting on him this whole time. He could die. I don't care. And then I was like,
Yeah,
oh,
wait a
wait a
second.
minute.
That's kind of
That's
like me.
like imagine if Jesus was like that with me.
Uh-huh.
Like, because I wanted so badly to be this incredible athlete.
Yeah.
Imagine if Jesus was like, man, forget your
Yeah,
career.
whatever.
You don't need that.
You've been plotting
Like,
against me the whole time.
I don't care.
Heck, we
Exactly.
crucified
So
Jesus. So in that way, I mean, Smeagol was doing that
exactly.
to the other guys. So
hmm Exactly. So we've wrapped up the Lord of the
hmm
Rings, as far as the Fellowship of the Ring and Gollum and everything, and they eventually do return back to the Shire, and they have this big celebration,
yes.
and everything's great. Sam gets back to the crib. He gets the girl that he wanted to be with. They fall in love. They have kids and everything. And Frodo decides to leave. This is pretty much opinion right here. I don't know that I like that because, first of all, I I struggle sometimes with when films don't really tell you what happens
Hmm.
next and it's the end of the
Yeah.
thing, because that's in the last movie he literally is like, yeah, I'm a dip with and live with the elves in this other faraway country or whatever, and Sam is like, I put my life on the line for you and you just go. He was about to leave without saying
Yes.
goodbye, by the way. He got on the boat and they just happened to see him. So what did you think about the ending? How did it complete the story, and what do you think that basically what happened next, and how does that then call the viewer into action?
I think it's hard to watch because of what you just said. I mean,
Mm,
like we feel for Sam. Like, yo, he just did so much for you. He didn't have to even go. Like the way that he found out about this quest was like he was just eavesdropping because that's his homie and he wants to know what's going
yes.
on. And he ends up going on this insane adventure with him, and then his friend turns away from him. But I mean, yeah, that like breaks our heart. I think it should. I think that's. I mean, in the grand narrative, we do that as humans all the time. I know I do. Uh, like I will cling to God whenever I need Him. Um, and then as soon as I like, feel like I'm doing good, my head's above the water, and I feel pretty, pretty set in my ways. Like I just kind of, stop praying, or I like kind of take a step away from the Bible. I'm like, I don't need that anymore. I'm good. I'm no longer at the bottom. I'm all right. and so we
Yeah.
walk away from what we once, desired. And so I think it should be heartbreaking, because that's ultimately what we do to God all the time. I mean,
Yeah.
Sam is Frodo's savior. I mean, if you really get down to it, Sam saved Frodo, and
Yeah.
we walk away from that love all the time. I do.
Yeah. Absolutely. So with, like we said, there's no main characters. We talked about a bunch of different people and how they represent God, and essentially how at least three of them, maybe four, could represent the main character or the main philosophy,
Mm,
main idea, or whatever. But really looking at it big picture through the whole narrative of all three movies, God is really the main character. Because
absolutely.
remember, like I said, this is all the Lord of the Rings comes from the Silmarillion. It starts from there. That's like essentially the prequel to the prequel of the Hobbits. God started this world of harmony, started the universe, set everything in order the way it's supposed to be. And evil then comes in and tries to create chaos and division and stuff like that. So by by all of these people doing what they can for the sake of the greater good, none of them necessarily win. Like
Yeah.
Gandalf does come back to life, but that was always the plan anyway. Aragorn does get married, Sam gets married, the girl from Rohan got married to the
Too.
other
Yeah.
dude. Yeah, so everybody ends up with a pretty happy ending, kind of except Frodo, like we
Hmm.
just mentioned. But bigger than that, it's not about the individual
No.
people. And I think hopefully saying this can open eyes for some people to see it in even more films and more TV. The force of good throughout the movie overcame the force of evil. That the force of good was God to begin with
Mm.
in this universe within this story. So Sauron wasn't defeated because Gollum took the ring into the fire, because ultimately that'll make Gollum the hero, and he's clearly not the hero. But God setting up a universe where evil would always be defeated by good enabled these people to do the
Yeah.
impossible things that they were able to do. So, with that in mind, Tom, how would you summarize how Lord of the Rings has an implication on us today in our daily lives? What does any of this have to do with how we see God and how we should respond to him?
So in Lord of the Rings, and like the grand narrative of that story, the call to action, the calling of like what we are to do is so similar to the Bible. It's to lead sacrificially. It's to lead
Mm,
with people. Gollum. Part of the reason that Gollum turned into what he turned into, that Smeagol turned into Gollum, was he isolated himself, and he just went into a cave and just kind of lived
yeah,
in his own shame and in his own um, like temporary happiness that he found in that ring. That ultimately, changed his entire persona, and physically and
yeah,
mentally. So we're called to
yeah,
live in a way that Frodo, Sam, Gandalf, Aragorn, Gimli, I mean, all of them, Legolas, like we are called to live in a way that they did, and through all of them, that ultimately is Jesus. So we are called to live as Jesus lived. It's pretty simple in that way, but it's also to trust that the the will of God will be the winner. The will of God is already written. Uh, the enemy has already been defeated. We just haven't seen it yet. The enemy has already
that's
been
facts.
defeated. But that's so awesome to me, because so often did Frodo and Sam like doubt going up that mountain, and throughout the entire story, like, oh my gosh, we can't do this.
Hmm.
But then they were just so encouraged and so reassured by the fellowship that they were, and not by the words of the fellowship, but by the actual actions of their brothers. Um, the actual actions of their sisters is what built them up and gave them the hope to keep going. But us as Christians,
Hmm.
we know the result. We know that we will win, and so what we have to do is
Yeah,
just encourage each other and be with each other. I mean, Frodo and Sam. Frodo couldn't have done without Sam. Sam couldn't have done without Frodo. we see what happens whenever you deal with these things in solitude, and that is Gollum. And so the
Hmm.
fellowship is so crucial to just the Christian life.
That's a bar, man. That's a bar. To add, so to sum up what you just said,
Mm,
leadership, sacrifice, not isolating
yeah.
yourself. And to add one more thing to that, well, not to add, but you said temporary
Yeah.
happiness is just, you said it's temporary. And yeah, I want to highlight that for anyone listening, man. Whatever, if you're getting yourself involved in anything and you're not willing to let it go if it contradicts God, contradicts God's word, then that thing is an idol in your life. If you put it before God, it is taking the space of God. So, I mean, and like he said, we've seen it in Smeagol. He isolated himself because he wasn't willing to let go of his idol. His body and his mind were devoured by the weight of his idol. Like, idols don't always appear evil, like I said. So just be diligent, be careful, have discernment, pray for discernment, because only the Holy Spirit gives us
Mm,
discernment to be able to see that not everything that glitters is gold.
that's right.
So, all right, Tom, thank you for joining, bro. We might have to do another episode because we talked about at least 5 topics and we only talked about one today. So, you might see Thomas back on the
I hope
channel.
so.
But
I hope
thank you
so,
so much for your time,
dude.
Thomas.
Of course.
Where can people see everything that you're doing? What are your
Oh
socials
man.
if you want to plug them?
I'm not super active on my socials, so please just reach out to me if you wanna talk, if you wanna communicate with me. But
For
you
sure,
can find me on Instagram at Thomas underscore 1514. And just send me a DM, follow me. I'll
Mhm.
respond, I promise.
For sure,
So yeah, reach out. But MJ,
for sure,
it's been such an honor to be out here, man, and just to be able to talk with you about these things and be able to talk with you about eternal things. It's encouraging to me, and I just hope it's just as encouraging, if not more encouraging, to the people listening. I just want to encourage
for
you,
sure.
dude. You're doing great things, and this is awesome. This is awesome. So keep being you,
Yeah.
man.
I
Yeah,
appreciate
bro.
that, bro. Tom, I
Love you
love
too,
you.
man.
Thank you for
Of
being
course.
here again. Thank you for, I'm proud of you, first of all, I have to say, for being so young. You're 20, but that's still very young, big picture. And you're leading people older than you and younger than you. So I want to encourage you the same way you encourage me. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep God first. And you don't stop being you. One of our teammates used to say that
Shout out
like three
Lane.
of our teammates used to say
Shout
it
out
every day.
Lane.
Shout out Leno. Shout out Camilo. Shout
Just
out
be you.
Eric. um, yeah, just be you, man. Never stop being you. I beg of you.
I
I beg of
beg. I
you.
plead. I
But
plead.
yeah, yeah, I love you, bro. Keep doing what you're doing. And yeah, for all the listeners, follow this page's social media at processing.pod on Instagram and TikTok. Subscribe to the YouTube channel here, processing pod, so without the dot. And yeah, we'll see you next week. Have a blessed week. Let's pray
Let's
before we
do
get
it.
out of here. Lord, thank you so much for this incredible conversation. I pray that it was fruitful and can shed light on the fact that you are in everything around us. You're not just a Sunday service God. You are God of every single day of the week, every single moment of our lives. I pray that everyone listening brings everything that's in our lives, every idol before you, leaves them at your feet, and continues to chase you down with everything that we have in our hearts, Lord. Continue to be around us, continue to reveal yourself, and meet every single person that is listening under the sound of my voice. Meet them in their need and fill every gap in their life, Lord. Bring them closer to you, soften their hearts, and help them hear your voice clearly. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, Tom, you have a good one. Till next time, everybody, y'all have a great week. I love y'all. See you next episode.